again. Then the next step, which happened a few weeks after that, was that she started noticing it before she responded and before she was going to make the same mistake again.
So she could stop herself.
Yes, and we worked on some techniques for her to use, such as asking questions instead of making statements, and allowing other people to come up with ideas, which was hard for her. She would take one step forward and several steps back. During the session that she told me she had started noticing it beforehand. Boy, I'm catching myself now, she would say, but I don't know what else to say because I know my usual response is to say, well, I don't agree. I think we should do it this way. And she said, what do I do? What do I say when I really believe that we should do it a different way or I really don't disagree? So we talked about the power of questions and how you can ask further questions to get more information from the person so that you don't have to say you disagree. What you have to do is ask them to help you understand where that thinking came from, how they came up with that opinion, why they would be making that decision, what would the impact be. And so I asked her to ask questions one day instead of making any statements. I said, don't allow yourself to make a statement. Just ask questions when people talk to you.
All day long.
All day long. And I did speak to her at the end of the day. I wanted to see how she was doing, and I actually called her cell phone. She was already at home in bed because she was exhausted. It was an exhausting day for her to have to ask questions. It's more difficult than it sounds, particularly when you do have very strong opinions and when you are a very assertive and aggressive person. So that behavior started to change, and I would say now, over many, many months, she can easily ask questions now and finds that, in fact, she's perceived as a much more collaborative person, and she's perceived as someone that helps other people grow and develop because she's allowing them to learn and allowing them to make their own decisions. Over time, that behavior started to become a habit for her. She started noticing before she spoke, and she would force herself to take a few seconds of silence before she spoke so that she could decide how she wanted to respond, because it is your choice. You have the choice of how to respond to others and how to behave. You don't always have the choice about what personality you have, but you absolutely have the choice about how you behave. And as long as you start with understanding where it comes from, how your behavior is perceived, what you would like to change, and work through that process, enormous gains can be made.
I love that story. I mean, what it says is change hurts. In other words, we have to get outside of our own comfort zone, but we have to want to do it.
That's the key, Patrick. You have to have the desire.
I'm thinking of a great example right now, Joe. One of our clients had a team that truly wanted to improve the way they work together. I'd like to speak now with Hal Little. Hal is the Director of Field Veterinary Services for Merial. Merial is a world-leading animal health company producing pharmaceuticals and vaccines for livestock and pets. Hal, tell us a little bit about your role at Merial.
Patrick, we have a group of 30 veterinarians. Each one is connected to one of our sales districts, and they are the technical resource for that district as well as for veterinary practitioners in their area of responsibility. Each one of my veterinarians has 8 to 9 territory managers that they serve, along with one district manager. They do not report into those districts. Those veterinarians report into me. So I manage and coordinate the technical arm of the company as it comes to small animal practice and how we deploy those veterinarians as a resource into the veterinary community.
So ultimately, how many people are reporting into you?
I have 31. I have 30 field veterinarians and one director here, so they'll ask me what I do on a day-to-day basis, and it's either I try to herd the cats or it's adult daycare, either or. But they're a great group, Patrick. They really are very, very diverse, very motivated, incredibly talented from a technical standpoint, and they're also great management resources into our various sales districts.
That's so interesting. It sounds like a great job, Hal. I know that in your work you've been turning to Caliper to help you hire some of those top performers and then to also develop them. But talk to us a little bit, if you would, about your experience with the 360.
Patrick, we became very interested in the 360 given that there is no reporting relationship for my veterinarians into the districts. And so we depend on feedback from the district counterparts, their constituents, if you will, and the territory managers they work with to try to develop their technical skill set, and then serving the district manager that is the territory managers report into. So recognizing that there's no reporting relationship there, kind of a dotted line, we wanted to look at the 360 and really find out how we were viewed from a territory level. What are some of the issues we need to pay attention to? What are some training opportunities? In essence, how to make us a better resource as we deploy them into the sales district.
So in terms of your 360, can you tell us what you learned about yourself?
What they wanted more from me is more time, and of course with 30 direct reports, that time is at a premium. It really helped me be more confident in what I was doing, and really the 360 helped me understand that I was trusted by the group. They did value what I had to offer from a management perspective. They were very eager for feedback, in fact wanted more feedback, more contact, more coaching, just more of me in their districts and in their personal endeavors within those districts. And the 360 helped point out a few things that I could do differently as far as communicating with them on conference calls and opening up those lines of communication. But it really helped me become more confident in my day-to-day activities, and realizing that having their trust and support was critical, and the 360 really reinforced that.
That's so interesting, Helen. It had to be very rewarding for you to get the positive feedback. I'm trying to do the math in my head here. They all want a little bit more of your time. If each of them just got 5 more minutes a day, so you're looking at 2.5 hours or something?
Exactly, yep.
So all they want is a little bit more time. What do you do then? I mean, you have 30 reports wanting just a little bit more time, looking for more coaching, looking for more guidance. How were you able to take that lesson and apply it in a way that became meaningful?
We looked at how we communicate, Patrick, and we're really an email-based as far as our culture in communicating. And so realizing they wanted more time, we've ramped up and scheduled additional conference calls, both from a mass level, kind of a 30-to-1, and then we've structured a little bit from a regional basis is the way our sales regions are set up. And so what we've tried to do is to take one in each region, 10, 10, and 10, and set up a communication method so that they could communicate internally from a collegial standpoint, and then it would give me the opportunity to communicate with them in smaller groups. And then we're just getting ready to work on our mid-year reviews now, and what I've done is set up individual calls with them for a 2-hour period over a 2-week span so that they feel much more in contact. And also what I did is ramped up and started traveling just a bit more and kind of going to some given areas that I have visibility, working with them.
That's excellent. So from the feedback that you got then, Hal, what you decided was, rather than, like I said, 5 minutes for everybody and we'll just keep spreading it around, you've taken solid chunks of time in 2-hour segments, as you're saying, and also being there physically with them. But I'm sure part of that was also you're being encouraged by they're actually saying, I'd like some more of his time.
Patrick, that was the real silver lining, if you will, that they wanted more contact, more coaching, more feedback, which is not atypical for veterinarians, very well-trained, scientifically based, and they wanted to know exactly how they are doing and what they're doing is right. So we've tried to reinforce that via regular emails, just as a thank you, and then certainly on face-to-face communications, phone communications individually via conference calls. So it was very inspiring to know that they wanted more coaching, more structure, more leadership. So it was a very pleasant surprise.
Now, part of the 360 process creates a real learning environment, a coaching environment. And so you've been talking to us very openly and candidly about your own 360. Could you talk to us about what you learned about some of the people you were coaching? Perhaps tell some stories about how you had to deal with some people in different ways in order to be more effective.
Sure, and Patrick, we have a relatively homogeneous group. Being veterinarians, tend to think the same way, probably way too accommodating, probably don't negotiate. We are used to giving information but not asking questions and receiving information. We did use the 360s earlier in the year when we went through our yearly review and planning process, and in fact had the booklet, their 360, all the data that I covered with them. They had access to it. They worked with you guys as far as a counselor when we did the Caliper evaluation of the 360, and then with that we transferred that into their yearly review and talked about some of those areas that we might all need to work on, but specifically individuals would need to work on, relating to negotiating and driving information into the end user, or in this case the veterinary practitioner and his or her paraprofessional team. We've negotiated an action plan and some steps of action afterward. That's probably the one thing that we worked on the most, is to be a little less accommodating and more into mutual benefit and mutual negotiation. One particular individual in California had really struggled with developing rapport and relationships in and around veterinary practitioners, and that really was borne out in some of the Caliper evaluations in some areas that we could help this individual communicate, ask more questions, get more acceptance, and just not be the font of information, but actually receiving and filtering that in and then coming out with an action plan afterwards. So it really worked well on the one individual, and it's worked very well to look at that data on how we can smooth out some rough edges on each one of the 30 individuals.
Mm-hmm. So your coaching had more to do with helping them to become a true consultant.
Exactly. And really, Patrick, that rings true for not just our external customers, those veterinary practitioners and their paraprofessional team, but it's especially important for internal customers, especially the territory managers and the district managers. They may have been in place for some as long as 20 years, doing the same job, very skilled, very knowledgeable, and then we come on from a technical perspective, and that really lends itself to almost an us and them mentality, especially if we're not real cognizant about listening and getting information from them and learning from them before we try to transfer information back to them. And Caliper has really helped us look at that as an avenue of improvement.
Now, was this the first time you've used 360s at Merial?
Yes, it is. And Patrick, we really blazed a trail, and we knew we were doing this, and we were the first to do that, and it really was born from recognizing that our relationship into the district was critically important, and what could we do, who were we, what did we look like, how did we think, and how could we take all that information and all that diverse thinking within the 30 and meld that into a system where we could help those 30 veterinarians be more of a resource and be plugged in more and develop those internal relationships first, and then be able to develop external relationships after that.
I'd be very interested to hear what it was like introducing it, because I think in many ways it's a very brave thing to do. In other words, you're asking people to be open. It's challenging. You're asking people to think about themselves in ways that they might not have before, consider ways that they're coming across they might not have intended. You're looking for people to improve, but there has to be an agreement and a culture around that supports that.
Sure, Patrick. In fact, I was a tad nervous at first, recognizing that this was an incredible tool, and we had talked about it internally, and we had actually listed 3 of my veterinarians to start working on some questions that they thought would be valid for a 360. So we were even considering doing one and kind of making up the questions here, and then when we kind of realized that, wow, Caliper can help us do this, we had planted a few seeds, and there was the recognition that we were looking at a 360. Patrick, I try to be very open in the way I communicate, but I knew that kind of going into this, that be a few that would be nervous, and especially ones where there might be a little bit of a tenuous relationship between themselves and the district manager or elements within the district. So knowing that, as I started to roll this out, I clearly explained that this was not for punitive measures and that we were looking for information so that we could be more skilled in what we do and be more functional and more of a resource to the district. And really, if we can't do that, Patrick, then we have no value to the company, really, because sales drives the big profit bus, and we support that. And I explained all that, and they trusted in that it was not for punitive measures, but for developmental purposes, and we've used that accordingly. And I'm pleased to say that when we were getting ready to do this with you guys, I had universal acceptance within group, and with the understanding that we were being a bit of a pioneer in doing this,